So for this second video regarding the Florida State University shooter and the media coverage from ABC News and others regarding his medical conditions and his reasoning for the shooting, I do want to briefly go into whether ADHD or ADHD medications can make somebody more likely to do something like this. And to start, I will concede that crime and poor decisions are associated with ADHD. There is an expert in the study of ADHD, Professor Farion, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who has a website, ADHDevidence.org. And one of the main things that website covers is the World Federation of ADHD International Consensus Statement. This is one of several scientific documents that try and gather everything that is known about ADHD that has been studied enough and studied repeatedly that you can say it likely is connected. And to give you an idea of just how much it is connected. And one of the things that they do mention in section 10.5 of that consensus statement is that for crime and delinquency, people with ADHD are more likely to be both the perpetrators and victims of crime, and they're more likely to be incarcerated. But a lot of this comes with important caveats. This is also true for any statistical group within a country that has been subjugated in certain ways, such as subjugated racial minorities in the United States. This is people with Black ancestry from Africa and people that have some degree of indigenous ancestry, either as a Native American or Hispanic American. So, it is important, but it's has more than just that. And when you're talking about ADHD as a matter that might be related to crime, one of the things is that's important here is that diagnosis and treatment actually lessen that. And what we know about this person basically is that they were fortunate enough to get diagnosed. Many people with ADHD are not. There are a number of obstacles in diagnosis, which I plan on discussing in other videos. But getting diagnosed, actually means that you are more fortunate and less likely to follow those negative paths. Following on that, though, ADHD does appear to have emotional impacts. Those emotional impacts are not criteria, from my understanding at the moment, in the um, diagnostics statistical manual, um, which is the way that many psychiatric disorders are um, diagnosed. There's other ways to diagnose ADHD as well, um, but that is probably the most common. But ADHD does appear to have emotional impacts, connections. Um, it also statistically is somewhat related to suicidality. And mass shooting is also generally a suicidal act. Um, Either the person is killing themselves at some point during the act, or they are doing it in a way where they expect the police to kill them. There are, of course, exceptions to this, but generally, this is not something people tend to uh, go into expecting, the kind of they usually think of this as like the end point. Um, you know, it's something that ends with their death and with deaths of others. In this case, part of the reason that did not occur is because the shooter was shot, I believe, once in the jaw. And I might at some point go into how that is somewhat curious regarding how uh, other criminals who are doing far less have been stopped in more aggressive manners. But generally, we knew that the police had to shoot him to subjugate him. Um, but generally, the thing is about in relation to ADHD is all those things are things that you're trying to treat when you have somebody diagnosed with these conditions. The impulsivity and the thought patterns. And regarding how it works in a neurological and biochemical matter, I have this little brain right here. And I believe this is the forebrain. That is the area that, you know, um, makes you take a moment and think about things, not be too impulsive, um, not be too ruled by emotion. It's later evolutionary development. Um, so if you're diagnosed, what they do is they give you medications that try and help that area function somewhat better. And the most effective, um, or at the very least, I say effective, but there's a number of ways to define effectiveness. But generally, what I would say should be the first line medication is a psychostimulant, which generally means either Adderall or Ritalin or a time released form of either of those, or another way of having that kind of medication go into your body generally, ideally, in a time-release fashion. There's also things called proto-drugs, which when your body digests it, that's when it turns into the medication. Um, but generally, it's the same type medication, but if you do it in a time-release fashion, it's more stable. And there's a number of benefits to that. But that helps in that area for impulsive and emotional acts, notably suicide. And one study I like to think to regarding that, and I will admit that I am not a scientific or medical expert. I just have the same access to studies as others do, so I can't evaluate it totally. But one of the studies that I think of in regards to that is there was a JAMA Network study in 2023 called Comparative Effectiveness of Pharmacotherapies for the Risk of Attempted or Completed Suicide Among Persons with Borderline Personality Disorder. And that was of the Swedish population. Some populations are easier to study because of the way that they run their healthcare plans, and Sweden is one of them. You can argue that there are some differences, and you can also point out that borderline personality disorder is different than some other types of emotionality. But the valuable thing that came from that study that I saw is for lessening significant suicidal behavior, ADHD medications, which in this case was either Ritalin or a time-released version of that, was better at reducing significant suicidal behavior than both antidepressants and mood stabilizing medications. And that in itself is impressive. But the other thing was that benzodiazepines, which is another medication, actually increased the significant suicidal behavior. And you are going to find out why that is important in the next video. So I encourage you to watch the next video, like, subscribe, and otherwise support and spread this message.